The two new 5-star characters within Wuthering Waves 2.1 are both characters that have very strong communities behind them, and a lot of people are wondering, should I be pulling for Phoebe or should I be pulling for Brant? Now, first of all, I'm gonna say a quick little disclaimer, obviously just pull for the one who you like more, but if you're asking who is a better character, that's what I'm going to be addressing in this video. When you first read their kits, you're thinking that they are different roles entirely. They don't really do the same things. But I can't say I agree fully, because Phoebe and Brant do have a couple of similarities that I would like to go over. The main one being that they can fill multiple roles within a team. They're not stuck to being just one kind of archetype, like for example, Carlotta is always going to be a DPS. But Phoebe and Brant, they have some other tricks up their sleeve. So I'm going to be going by each team role that they have, and I will be telling you which one is better. Starting with the first role that I had in mind being them as a Hypercarry. Now when you first read Brant's kit, you think he's supposed to be a support. But when you look deeper into it, you realize that Brant has actually good personal damage. And because most of his damage is focused on basic attacks, you immediately get the idea, like hey, I can run this character with Sanhua and run them as a Hypercarry. But how effective is this actually? Well, I'm here to say that it'll do fine. Brant as a Hypercarry is definitely one of the ways that you can play him. It might not be the best way to play him, but it definitely is viable and it can clear TOA, which is very nice to see considering the fact that Kuro Games designed him to work with Chang Li, who is already a DPS character. So the fact that Brant works as a Hypercarry is nice to see. But I will have to be the one to burst your bubble, because as a Hypercarry compared to other Hypercarries that are limited 5 stars, he is not going to compete. If you compare him to GN, Shangliao, or Camellia, he will be performing significantly worse. He's not really on that level. He's still good enough to clear TOA though. His gameplay and usability is also pretty fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. There's no glaring issues like Camellia standing still, for example. Teammate-wise, he is rather limited, because you would want to run him with Shorekeeper or Sanhua if you run him as a Hypercarry, with there not really being many alternatives other than Verena instead of Shorekeeper. Now moving on to Phoebe. Phoebe as a Hypercarry is something I've talked about a lot, and mainly in a negative light. But when you compare her Hypercarry abilities to Brant, she is just straight up superior. Brant is not better than Phoebe as a Hypercarry, despite Phoebe's numerous flaws within the Hypercarry playstyle. If you want me to mention them all, there are quite a couple of videos that I've made about Phoebe that mention them, but the Cliff Notes version is that it's really hard to give Phoebe damage buffs because she already gives herself a lot of buffs and makes it hard for other kinds of buffs to affect her a lot. So as a Hypercarry, she does end up falling behind other Hypercarries much like Brant, but it's not as much as Brant. She also features greater team variety, being able to be played with Rochia, Sanhua, and also Mortefi in the second slot. You can also choose to run Shorekeeper and Rover together, and have Rover be the Moonlit Clouds holder. However, if you do choose to do this, it's going to be worse than running Rover with the Rejuvenating Glow set, and then some other kind of second slot. Next up, moving on to their ability to be a functioning dual carry character. And this is the role that both of them seem to excel best at, aka working together in a team with another dual carry character like Chang Li to do a lot of damage along with this other character. First off, beginning with Brant again. He was designed to work with Chang Li, so obviously there's a good synergy here. When you hold Brant's aerial attack, he will be able to do a very long animation that you can quite easily swap cancel out of, making it so Brant is able to have many swap windows that you can comfortably exploit using Chang Li or Shangliao. Now in terms of damage output, I would say that he's not really as good as the average dual carry character. His damage is certainly lower than that of Chang Li or that of Shangliao, but he does come with the twist of being able to heal your team and shield them. This means that you have an extra layer of utility on this character, meaning that safety is not as big of a problem as if you were not running Brant. This also makes it so that Shorekeeper or Verena are not needed in your team, and you can actually choose to run a triple carry team, featuring Changli, Shangliao, and himself. This is something that Phoebe is not able to do. But a downside that Brant does have is that he has a very limiting 12-second duration on his Liberations buff, which is kind of a shame, because in dual carry teams you would like to have some more leniency when it comes to enhanced state uptimes, or just not have an uptime at all. Because if you have a certain duration limiter to your abilities or your buffs, it makes you more limited in the way you can do rotations, because you have to maximize your Brant during the 12 seconds where he is buffed. And if you're not doing that, you're just losing out on damage. But now, moving on to Phoebe, she has unique challenges of her own, I'll just say that. Phoebe is very much a special type of character, because she really wants Spectrofrazzle to be applied on the enemies for her to do damage. This is of course assuming you are in the Absolution state and not the Confession state, but Confession is used for a more supportive role, so Absolution would be the better state in this kind of team. This means that you are unable to use Varina or Shorekeeper at all in these types of teams, and have to run Spectral Rover as your third character, and much like Hypercarry Phoebe, you would be running them on Rejuvenating Glow with Fallacy of No Return. So this actually does have the unique effect of making your Varina or Shorekeeper available for other teams, which is a big bonus if you ask me. However, it does come at the downside of your second carry character, aka Changli or Shangliao, being less powerful, because you have to buff your Phoebe. But you're not losing out on that many buffs, because realistically, the only thing that Varina is giving you that Spectral Rover can't is 20% attack and 15% damage amplification, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that much buffing. In these teams, Phoebe also has a higher damage output than that of Brant, which makes sense because Phoebe gives herself a lot of stats, so a team where you are not able to be buffed, Phoebe is excelling. And now moving on to their final team role, aka for being a sub-DPS slash buffer. Starting again with Brant. Brant has some very rare buffs in his kit that are very much appreciated, because within a sub-DPS role, Brant is capable of buffing 20% fusion damage amplification and 25% skill damage amplification. Skill damage amplification is a pretty rare buff currently, only being available to Zhezhi, Taochi, and Lumi, and Lumi and Taochi are famously bad at the buffing role, making it so that your only real option currently was Zhezhi. And obviously, Zhezhi is best in slot with Carlotta and Jinchi, with Jinchi mainly due to the coordinate attacks, but Brant being able to buff skills is very nice for characters that do primarily skill damage, but don't need Zhezhi's coordinate attacks, the main one being Changli. However, the main issue with Changli is that she's not really meant to be a hyper carry, and is mainly supposed to be a dual carry character, which means that Brant's buffs will be lost when you swap out. However, if you do choose to run a Hypercarry Changli team, with Brant you will be getting quite the big upgrade over if you were not running Brant. Brant also opens up the capability for you to run Jinchi, Brant, and Zhezhi. This way you still get coordinate attacks from Zhezhi, and you also get the 25% skill damage amplification on both of your Jinchi half rotations. The main flaw of this compared to the Shorekeeper variant is the fact that you're not getting Shorekeeper or Varina buffs, but you can make up for this by the fact that Brant has pretty good personal damage on his own. So it should turn out to be a pretty equal team, if not slightly worse. Moving on to Phoebe, Phoebe's buffs are a lot more, how do I call this, specialized. So the issue with Phoebe as a sub-DPS is that her buffs are entirely focused on Spectral Frazzle, which we currently cannot fully exploit with something like a DPS character that can explode Spectral Frazzles. Think about Kafka for Honkai Star Rail, but instead, for Spectral Frazzle in Withering Waves, we don't have a character like that yet, so Spectral Frazzle related buffs aren't that relevant yet. But what I will say is Phoebe can buff Spectral Frazzle by a disgusting amount. And even currently as a sub-DPS, Phoebe's personal damage is actually pretty respectable. It's nothing like Yinlin, but it is actually pretty nice. So all we need is that Spectral Frazzle character so that Phoebe's buffs can be actually exploited. However, considering the fact that this kind of character just doesn't exist yet, I'm gonna have to give the win here to Brant. So overall, I think that Phoebe is better as a hypercarry, Brant is better as a sub DPS buffer, and then as a dual carry character, I'd say they're pretty equally matched. There's not really a big winner in this scenario. So that gets us two pretty equal characters, right? Well, I'm still gonna have to give my preference to one of these characters, which I think is actually pretty hard. But the preference I'll be giving is for Brant. Brant just has more characters that can use him in the current moment, whereas Phoebe is kind of waiting for something in the future. Brant can be used with Chinchi, Brant can be used as a dual carry with Carlotta, Brant can be used as a dual carry or as a buffer for Chang-Li. And these are all use cases that Phoebe just is lacking right now. She has a mediocre hypercarry team, and then she can be used as a good dual carry, which is just less than what Brant has to offer. But if Phoebe is given the tools to succeed in upcoming patches, I think that her value will skyrocket. We just don't have that yet. So who are you pulling for? Phoebe or Brant? Let me know in the comments below. If you learned anything new from this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions for me, you can comment them down below, but a better way to reach me would be through my Discord server, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there. If you just want to hear my random thoughts on stuff as it comes out, you can follow me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, which is also linked in the description. But that'll be it from me. Peace.